Rough Cut. Oh, hello. In this Rough Cut video, we'll be looking at the concept of data danger, or the input paradox. We'll discuss how the use of facts, data, best practices, and the assumptions you make actually can increase the risk to your organization and undermine your journey to success. We'll also explore the revolutionary concept that thinking for yourself can be a competitive advantage. Okay, before we go any further, stop, time out, take a powder. I know some of you out there are getting sweaty armpits and your underwear is getting a bunch. Relax, take it easy. Here's a spoiler alert. I promise I'm not going to ask you to give up your data, your analysis, your quest for excellent practices. I'm simply going to ask you to be smart about how you do it. So, exactly what is the root? What is the starting point of this discussion? What is it about us that both allows and makes it necessary to have this conversation? Human beings have a capability which is unique to them. To the best of our knowledge, no other creature on the planet can do this. And what is that? We learn. Well, many animals can learn. We use tools. Well, seagulls and chimpanzees can use tools. We can intentionally use creative mistakes as a learning tool, as a series of approximations. Now we're getting closer. The thing that we have is the ability, remotely and abstractly, to gain experience and knowledge by proxy. This means that we don't need to see someone teaching us. We don't need to be present. We can read a book. We can go online and we can learn that way. We can call someone on the phone. We can watch television or read the newspaper. This is like the knowledge version of compound interest. We can build on and grow from and benefit from the learnings and experience of an entire planet. And there's the rub. The very things that are our strengths that make us unique can turn around and bite us in the butt and become weaknesses. We can be educated. We can use data. We can take that data and analyze it and gain experience from others and build on our own experience. We can integrate from multiple sources and come up with something completely new. But these same capabilities can cause us to be biased, to make assumptions and jump to conclusions, to wear blinders that cause us to miss obvious truths, to have beliefs which can be as unshakable as they are incorrect, and in the worst cases, to use these tools for intentional misdirection. Just the facts, ma'am, just the data. When dealing with facts and data, when people are bringing you facts and data to support or influence a decision, here are some things to remember to take into account. Is that data rigorous? Was it collected with good definitions and with solid controls? Is it applicable to your situation? Was the data collected with integrity and honesty, or with a predisposed desire to believe? Can you rely on it when it is handed to you? Realistically, do you think that Gregor Mendel solved the entire genetics puzzle in his little pea patch? Think about it. Big data. Don't be seduced by it. For one thing, big data has its own set of inherent problems. It's big, for one thing, and hard to control. It looks really good because it has a lot of weight. Examine big data closely. Correlation versus causation. Because two things happen repeatedly together doesn't mean they are necessarily related to one another. It could be a third variable that they're both related to. Ratio versus magnitude. Understand both of those aspects of your data. We had a 50% increase in sales, but if you went from 2 to 3, that is not as impressive, is it? Get both. Is your culture predisposed to accept or reject certain kinds of data? And are there variables hidden in the mix that you are not aware of? Here are some examples of misuse or misunderstanding of data. Did you know, for instance, that children who sleep with the lights on are much more likely to be nearsighted as adults? This may have to do with the fact that their parents are nearsighted and leave the lights on when they go to bed. Did you know that people who sleep with their shoes on are much more likely to wake up with headaches in the morning? Again, absolutely true, and probably related to the fact that you're much more likely to go to sleep with your shoes on if you've been drinking. Here's another interesting bit of data. In World War I, when they started using helmets during battle, there were many, many more head injuries recorded and sustained. Again, possibly due to the fact that there were more people alive after they were injured in their head to have a head injury. Children in daycares are much more aggressive and likely to fight and pick on each other than children who are homeschooled. Again, absolutely true. However, upon further examination, we discover that it's necessary for human development to understand the boundaries of aggressive behavior and how to deal with aggressive behavior in others. It's a developmental step that we need to go through in order to learn how to effectively interact with one another. And Alan Greenspan, who was chair of the Federal Reserve from 1987 to 2006, spent a great deal of his time gathering data that was free of the taint of human emotion. He has since admitted that that very absence of human context was the thing that caused us to miss the upcoming 2008 financial meltdown. Data, minus the knowledge of basic human emotional reaction, was sadly incomplete. Let's take a moment now to step into the world of best practices, and you will notice I put quotes around that term. You'll see why in a moment. Of course, it is our duty as managers to conscientiously find the best way to do what we need to do. But, to quote Augustus Caesar, make haste slowly. When you're considering adopting a best practice, here are a few concepts to keep in your hip pocket to help you decide if it's right for you. Let's start right here. The term itself has no agreed-upon definition, which means anything can be called a best practice at the discretion of the person who's developed that practice. It's highly situational. Success may depend upon where it was implemented. They are highly publishable. College professors and consultants make reputations and money by discovering and publishing information about best practices. They sound good, of course. Who would not want to implement the best practice? No, laddie, we'll be having no best practices around here. If they're good enough for us. Just doesn't have the same sparkle, does it? They often have variables you do not know about. They are the path of least resistance. The boss will often say yes to a published best practice as opposed to some idea you came up with yourself. They are frequently misunderstood because of the reasons we just went over. They are often misapplied for the same reason. And by definition, a best practice is an activity, not a result. If you are bringing a best practice in, it needs to be tied to results. Now, here are some examples of best practices which in their day ruled, but no longer. Until 1915, if you were making a movie, you sat the camera on a tripod and the actors walked in and out of the frame. In 1915, D.W. Griffith released Birth of a Nation, a perfectly despicable movie in terms of racism. But he discovered that the camera is the star of the movie. 1 second you can have a close-up of someone's face, the next second you can be looking at a sunset. It revolutionized movies. Until the 1970s in Australia, Aboriginal children were being taken, abducted from their families, and placed in state homes where they could lose their heritage and assimilate into the mainstream culture. A practice which now, a mere 40 years later, we would consider vile and inhuman. Who would have thought money coming out of a machine in a wall would have been a good idea? It took some courage to put up the first ATMs. Until Henry Ford came along, cars were built basically one at a time in the backyard, and they were very expensive. Tabloid-sized newspapers were fought tooth and nail by editors and publishers. They were convinced the best practice was to print on broadsheet, those large newspapers. It turns out that at one time in England, taxes were charged by the number of pages in a newspaper, which is why the broadsheet newspaper was invented. And finally, identification best practice, fingerprints. You have a unique fingerprint. The chances of someone else having that same fingerprint are billions to 1. The chances of it being misidentified in the lab, 1 in 100. Not as solid as you might think. Best practices, keep your eyes open. The third challenge you will face, if you want to make the best decisions you can and let your vision soar, is made up of your own beliefs and assumptions. In many ways, it's also the most insidious and the hardest to see. This is because they're made up of the things we know to be true, that we have accepted and we no longer question. 150 years ago, people believed life spontaneously generated in jars of rotten meat. 20 years ago, your mother knew it took chewing gum 7 years to go through your stomach to be digested. And when you're asked to make decisions and to make plans, you bring many things you know to the table. This is a result of saturation. You've heard it many, many times, and you no longer think about it. You've let your imagination atrophy. You may have a vested interest one way or the other, and you've convinced yourself that it is true based on what is best for you. Beliefs can also be very important to people and be the basis of intentional misdirection on occasion. Sometimes you are so close to something, you're so proximate, that you don't see the reality of the situation. And executives are particularly prone to a perception bubble. As we get older, more powerful in organizations, and wealthier, we tend to become more removed from what we need to know to make the correct decision. Henry Ford knew that the Model T was the ultimate automobile and refused to look at development of other vehicles. And in about 6 years went from 65% of the American automobile industry ownership to about 35% and never recovered #1 spot again. Roger Smith's professor in college knew that an overnight delivery service of the magnitude he was talking about was not possible. The publisher who turned down J.K. Rowling knew children are not interested in witches and wizards anymore. In 1968, Business Week knew it was very unlikely the Japanese would carve out a sizable portion of the United States automobile market. In 1946, Darryl Zanuck, who ran 20th Century Fox, knew that television was not something people would want to look at every single night in their living room. And finally, IBM knew in 1959 that there may be 5,000 photocopiers needed in the United States. That's about it. Your takeaway, what you know and what you believe, can be a risky business. So, what can happen? Well, if you're Lee Iacocca and you can't get Ford to listen to you, you might go to Chrysler with your little idea for a minivan. If you are the president of Western Union Telegraph in 1876, you might know that that telephone is just a toy and turn down the patent for $100,000, the most valuable patent in the history of the world. If you are the Surgeon General of the United States in 1967 and misread the data, you might make the statement that we've wiped out infectious diseases in this country. If you sell cosmetics to young women and girls, you may know the best practice is to advertise in magazines, even though young women and girls primarily get their information from their mobile devices now. If you are NASA and you are not paying attention to your data, you may wind up with a catastrophic shuttle failure. And if you are AOL and you become so full of yourself and saturated with winning, you may not notice when you become a late-night television joke and others are eating your lunch. You get the idea. What to do? Well, the first thing to do is to realize it's not as simple as I'm trying to make it sound here. I'm getting off a lot of yucks at the expense of some very, very smart people with the benefit of 20/20 hindsight, and that is not really fair. The point of this exercise is to examine the experience of others and help you do the best when your turn comes. The first and most important thing to do is to remember you are in charge of your data, your assumptions, and your practices. You manage them. They don't manage you. And I know that's easier said than done. Why is this? Why is it so tough? Well, because we're humans. We like to get a direction. We like to make a decision. There is no easy answer, and there's no guaranteed path to success. There are, however, a few things you can do to help. And I say, when in doubt, make a list. Make a cheat sheet. Start with the basics. First, what are your drivers? Why are you here? Why are you looking at this? What's your business problem you are trying to solve? Understand these are tools, not drivers. This data and these best practices are tools, and make sure you're not using them as a delaying tactic to avoid doing what is necessary. Second, comprehend what you're working with. Understand your data. Listen to what's being said. Demand completeness and full disclosure on all data and all best practices. Did this best practice drive results or not? Encourage skepticism and mandate your team to find logical holes in anything you are looking at. Next, analyze. Make sure you've defined your plan to analyze the data or best practice, etc. Handicap your findings. Understand if someone really wants this or not, and handicap accordingly. Validate discounters. If someone's disagreeing with something, get under the covers, find out why. And please get an independent review, someone who will not benefit or be harmed by acceptance of your analysis. Results and conclusions. Remember Occam's razor. All things being equal, the simplest answer is probably the right one. Challenge questions. Make sure you ask questions which challenge the conclusions. Root out what the assumptions are. There will always be assumptions underneath. Don't make data fugue decisions. When you've been immersed in the data, back up and get away from it before you make a decision, and think outside the box. It's a basic, but it's always true. Finally, when you use it, make sure you have a line of sight from a best practice to a result. Test your hypotheses. Run a proof of concept. Predict your outcomes. Make sure when you're going in, you know what the outcomes should be. Do what is necessary to support a test, a proof of concept, or an implementation, and monitor and measure. Pretty basic stuff. You got most of this in 9th grade physics. And now, the flip side. You also need to open your mind. You need to try to shake off what you think you know and work at hearing what is being said. You need to listen like a child. First, plow the field. You need to exercise your mind, live outside the box. You need to practice keeping your mind open. There are things you could do. Stimulate your eyes. Go to an art gallery. Stimulate your ears. Listen to radio that you don't usually listen to. Listen to music you don't usually listen to. Learn something new. Talk to someone you would never talk to. Seek out opposite points of view. Exercise your brain. Get off your phone, get off your computer, and exercise your brain. Be consciously receptive. Keep your ego in check. Shut up. Be present. Again, get off your phone. You don't need to be on your phone or on your email in this meeting. Listen. Adjust your brain so it's focused on the person talking. Watch your words. Do not intimidate the speakers. And root out your own assumptions. Keep your eyes open. Again, validate discounters. Find out why they are not agreeing. Get under the covers. Keep an eye out for people who are talking in code. Are they evaluating their words? Are they parsing their sentences very tightly? Does it just not feel right? If they're talking in code, find out what's going on. Are there fears that you need to get to the bottom of? Fear will cloud anyone's decision. Finally, trust yourself. If you need to use your intuition, the business hunch is a valid way to do things. If you don't have enough data, a good executive sometimes has to make the decision anyway. Go with the decision. So it comes down to this. In the course of your career, you will be asked to evaluate opportunities, make plans, find solutions. And you will repeatedly face the potential and the challenges offered to you by best practices, data, and the beliefs and assumptions of you and your staff. It's your job to balance, manage, and control these tools to provide the best outcome for your organization. And here we are at the end. Use the best methods and tools you have available and use them properly. But at the end of the day, it's about you and your team taking accountability to make the correct decision. Not the easy or safe one, the correct one. Then making the commitment to do what needs to be done to lead and manage your organization to success. And there you go. It really is about that.